Season 5, Episode 30 of Brackets, Bubbles, and Bit Stealers. I am Jonathan Lipskin. We have no Sam Fetterman tonight, but instead we have two very good guests, I should say, that I'm excited to welcome. Vance, Baker, both with me from the March to the Arch podcast. How are you doing, guys?
Doing great. It's a great evening here in Central Illinois. And you know what, Jonathan? Missouri Valley hoops and college basketball hoops start here on Monday. And you know what? We've got a Missouri Valley Conference team kicking off the college hoops slate.
Yes,
so it's a great day.
Baker?
Yeah, Jonathan, thanks for having us on.
Of course. So basically, you guys who have seen all of the previews so far know the routine. We're going to go 1 to 12 discussing each team in this league. From my power rankings, I put out the near 10,000 word Missouri Valley preview on brackets, bubbles, and bidstealers.com earlier today. But first, I want to talk about the league as a whole, because this was a league that had some of the most offseason change of any league in the country. We lost coaches. We lost key players. We are losing a team next offseason, and there is currently no plans for a replacement as far as I know. So, Vance, I'll start with you, and we'll kind of just go around the table here. What do we think about the current state of the Missouri Valley?
Yeah, the current state of the Missouri Valley is kind of in flux, right? Everything you mentioned. But I would say this could be a reawakening year for the Missouri Valley. You know, just to put some numbers to kind of the concepts you teased out there about the Missouri Valley. 5 new coaches. We've got teams who are replacing 15, 14 players on rosters. And we're going to be losing a team at the end of the season, and Missouri State moves on. So a lot of unknown in the Missouri Valley, but I think that's more of a testament to the NCAA landscape right now. So with all of that change, with all of the roster turnover, I mean, KenPom comes out and we're the 11th ranked conference in NCAA, which is just right below where we ended last year. So I think that's more of maybe parity, or not even parity, unknown of so many teams in the NCAA landscape that, you know, if I'm buying stock right now, I would buy stock in the Missouri Valley Conference.
Yeah, so I'll tag on to what you just said, Vance. I think it is a down year for the Valley, for sure, compared to last year when we were a top 10 league. I think we're really going to feel that early in the season in the non-conference, because we have a lot of teams who are trying to put it together in the offseason. And there's only, a handful of teams that really have a core coming back. So we're going to feel it early in the offseason or in the non-conference. But as the season goes on, to Vance's point, I think it's going to get better and better, because if you look at a lot of the coaches that they brought in, a lot of the new players that are coming in, a lot of talent, a lot of really good pieces coming into the Valley. So unfortunately, I think overall the league will be lower than 10th in the country this year, but the league is going to get stronger as the year goes on, for sure.
Yeah, I do think that if the league finishes 11th, like, that's a perfectly fine result. Like, this is a league that obviously you lost multiple coaches that went up. You lost multiple players to both the professional ranks and many players to the portal. You had a couple other additional coaches fired that had like good years very recently. And so this is a league that is, I don't want to use the rebuild word, but maybe retool sort of. You have a lot of teams that were really good last year that are just kind of like, they're going out and finding new coaches and finding new players. And in this era of college basketball, that's very, very hard to do.
We have a handful of teams that are taking one step back to take 2 steps forward. When you talk about a Drake, a Belmont, even in Indiana State, these teams are going to take a step back this year, household names, but just wait. They have a good core coming in. They should be good in the future.
And I would say one thing, you know, I don't think we're getting ahead of any conversation here, but the reality is, like, this is a 1-bid league, barring something crazy happening. I mean, I don't think we're getting into schedules in this conversation, but like, no team has a non-conference that is an at-large conference or non-conference schedule, in my opinion, you know, on surface level. Yeah, I mean, teams can go on runs, and, you know, if you don't lose, that's one thing. But no one has the opportunity, I think, in the broader NCAA landscape to make a splash and for us to even be talking about a 2-bid Valley.
Yeah,
And I think we're going to hurt ourselves in the non-conference because we're going to carry a lot of losses into conference play because last year we had a better non-conference as a league, and so a lot of these games in the conference season meant a lot more. Where you had Indiana State, who they basically were unlucky to not get an at-large because of how everything shook out championship week. So, but I think that we're going to dig ourselves a hole before we get into conference play, where some of these teams are going to be ranked even up until 200 in the Ken Palm. So to make it a little more difficult for the Valley this year.
Yeah, and the other part of that whole scheduling thing is some of the top teams in this league. This league is kind of in that like weird middle ground where like the top teams in the league, they're good enough that like no high major wants to schedule them, and like that was one of the problems that Indiana State really ran into that this year. Or last year, I should say. This year, I'm sure Bradley and Northern Iowa probably ran into those problems as well. So with that being said, why don't we jump right into breaking down some of these teams, and we will start with my pick to win the league, the Bradley Braves. They won the league 2 years ago, lost in the Missouri Valley Championship game to Drake, finished third last year. They had a better year last year than the year they won the league, despite the fact that they finished third, at least power ranking wise. And that was just because of the nature of how good the top of the league was. But this is a team that in a conference that lost a lot, returns a lot. Duke Dean back, Darius Hannah back, Elmar Atlason back, Demarion Birch back, and then a good transfer class with Connor Dillon. You get a Marfo transfer with Zeke Montgomery, and then also you get a really solid JUCO piece in Corey Thomas, as well as some other names that I did not mention. So I'll start with Baker for Bradley. Give me your overall thoughts on the team that I have to win the league this year.
Yeah, start with the Illinois State fan to talk about Bradley. Yeah, no, Bradley's good. I mean, especially on paper, they're the class of the league. I think with what they have coming back with Duke Dean, Darius Hannah, Christian Davis, that's really good 3 veteran players, along with Almar Atlason, Demarion Birch, a couple of young guys I think will take another step forward. And like you said, the transfers coming in, whether it's a Connor Dillon, a Zeke Montgomery, who we had Brian Wardle on, he said his game has evolved so much in this past offseason from when he's had him from 2 years ago when he was at Bradley before. Yeah, this is a really good team. I think the big question mark for me with this team is how they do without Malavi Leones and Connor Hickman. Duke Dean always had Hickman with him, and Darius Hannah always had Malavi Leones there too. So they're going to kind of have to do it on their own, so to speak, with and have the other pieces around them step up. But on paper, this is just such a really good team and really well coached with Brian Wardle.
Yeah, this is going to be a fun team. I mean, everybody picked Bradley, or at least, sorry, the coaches. And media poll in the Missouri Valley Conference has Bradley at 1. I'd say a lot of the previews have Bradley at 1 for good reason. Everything you all mentioned, in my opinion. And so I think just one of the fun facts for Bradley is you have a player that's coming back to Bradley and Zeke Montgomery. So started his career at Bradley, went elsewhere, and is back at Bradley. So I mean, when you think of minutes returned of last year, this is a player that's coming in to a program that he knows. And so I think that, that might get discounted a little bit if you're one of those that like to look at minutes returning in a transfer portal era. That's one thing that, I'd point out. But I really like Jonathan, when you look in Missouri Valley, Almar Atlason, I think he's one to put on your flying under the radar because Bradley has so many other good players. He's one that I could see making a good leap. And man, is he a sharpshooter from 3 for a big guy.
He's a really tough cover. 6'8", can really knock it down. This team's just has so many intriguing players and shooters across the board. Like even a guy like Demarion Birch had a really good year shooting the ball last year in limited minutes. Corey Thomas is the most intriguing piece here for me because when they got him, people were just raving about him. When you watch the film of him, the tools pop. He's athletic. He's long. He can really impact the game on both ends of the floor. I do think that at the start of the year for him, there may be a little bit of a growing process catching up to the speed of Division I college basketball.
Yeah, and I mean, if you look at Bradley's roster, he doesn't have to be really good right away either, because there's a lot of good depth in the inside for their front court. So he's another guy that's just really interesting. This is one of those coaches though in the Valley. Valley has always had a history of, we have a lot of really good coaches, and Brian Wardle is one of those guys that, bringing in a few players to an already good core, I have no doubt that they're going to gel right away.
Yeah, Vance, any final thoughts on the Braves?
Nothing. I mean, they're locked to be at least the top 4 spots, I would say. If they don't have a bye in St. Louis, something went terribly wrong.
Yeah, it would take probably some pretty long-term injuries here. I will say that, like, I do think people are going to know the name Connor Dillon soon. I thought his tape was really solid, and that Winona State program at the Division II level is a very good one. So let's move on to number 2. I will admit, and I wrote this in the article too, I considered picking Northern Iowa to win the league. I didn't end up going with them. I wouldn't be like totally shocked if that it went that way. Their transfer class to me is good. I know it's small, but Max Weisbrod from Northern Michigan, just a big time shooter, and then Leon Bond is someone that, from an athletic standpoint, you don't see a lot of guys like that in this conference. And then the guys they return, Titan Anderson, Trey Campbell will both be like all Valley guys. Jacob Hudson could be as well. He's a just very good rim protector and lockdown defender. Their defense was so much better when he was on the floor last year. And then the questions I really have is, like, is Trey Campbell gonna like play full-time point guard for this team, and can he do it? And then which of these younger guys are stepping up off the bench? I liked RJ Taylor coming out of high school. Kyle Pock's a name that should be mentioned. Vance, we'll start with you for this one and kind of alternate. Can Northern Iowa win the league, and how close do you think the gap is between them and Bradley, if you do think they are number 2?
I am with you. I think they're definitely number 2, and I think you could make the argument for number 1. But at the end of the day, I'm going to go with experience on the court with Bradley over Northern Iowa. But yeah, I mean, they're a Bowen-born point guard returning away from contending for that number 1 preseason pick. So I'm with you. There's kind of a I don't know, a stigma, and I mean it jokingly, is you don't bet against Ben Jacobson and the Northern Iowa Panthers. But here's what we do know. More likely than not, they're going to start off slow because they always let us down in the non-conference. And then they just tear it up in conference season and really rip our KenPom rankings and just bring down the Valley a little bit, just because they're just atrocious in the non-conference. But, back to some of those names, I think you can argue Titan Anderson. That I think my hot take is, if there's going to be someone that I'm going to look ahead and potentially pick as the Larry Bird Player of the Year this year, I think Titan Anderson's name could be in that conversation at the end of the season. Do I think Duke Dean should have been the Player of the Year preseason? Absolutely. But Titan Anderson, someone we haven't talked about yet, that's going to contribute big for the Northern Iowa Panthers. You nailed Hudson. He comes from Loyola. Whenever they were in the Valley, he played for Loyola. So it's a name and a player that I'd say Ben Jacobson knows, and he's one of those players that it's Ben Jacobson ball. So if you know anything about good coaches, Ben Jacobson's one of those for the Northern Iowa Panthers. But all that to say, I'm with you on number 2, and the gap, back to your question, the gap between Bradley and Northern Iowa is not that large. Baker, what do you got?
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I don't think the gap's huge. I think they're we kind of named them the number 1 contender in the Missouri Valley Conference this year. They are the team right below Bradley. I mean, on paper, if you look at Bradley, you have to pick Bradley first, but this team is right behind them. Best starting front court in the league with Anderson and Hudson. We had Harry Schrader on our podcast that's going to come out coming up soon, and he actually mentioned Ben Schweiger from Loyola, another Loyola kid, that he's heard just rave reviews about from over there in Cedar Falls. So he's a guy to definitely watch out for Northern Iowa. But just to kind of piggyback on everything Vance said, this is a really good team. They're going to be well coached. They will not play well in the non-conference. That's a running joke in Valley circles. It's just they always let us down in the non-conference. But Ben Jacobson knows how to win the league. So when you get to Valley play, they're going to be right there at the end. Yeah,
I was on the conference call 2 years ago before the Missouri Valley tournament. When Ryan Pedon called Ben Jacobson the Tom Izzo of the Missouri Valley. And as funny as that sounds, like, he's right. Like, Jacobson just finds ways to win games in this league. He always does. Like, I watched last year, and like, we had Casey Alexander on the pod last year, and I love the guy, but Jacobson completely outcoached him in that quarterfinal. Northern Iowa looked like the way more prepared team, despite the fact that I thought Belmont might have had more talent in that game. And then we talk about Titan Anderson. He was my pick to win Conference Player of the Year in my article that I published today. I saw like that performance that he had in that quarterfinal game last year against Belmont was one of the more ridiculous things I've like ever seen in college basketball. He completely physically dominated that game, and I think it only goes up from here without Bowen Bourne, without Nate Heisey, because he's going to be more involved in their offense. All right, let's go to number 3. That is the Drake Bulldogs. And the first line of my article in the Drake section today was the Valley fans that have kind of like started to dislike Drake over the last couple years. Like that might not be going away because Drake made a really good hire. And I think it would probably take some things going wrong for Drake to win the league. But there is no doubt that Ben McCollum has put together a good roster here with 4 guys that he brought over from Northwest Missouri State, a place where he won game after game after game and championship after championship. Not to mention Nate Ferguson returns. Cam Minyawu, I think, is going to be one of the best players in the Missouri Valley this year. He was really underutilized at Wyoming last year. And so was Cale Combs, who I think is going to be this team's starting point guard to start the season. Baker, what do you got for me on the Drake Bulldogs post Darian and Tucker DeVree era?
So I'm not as high on them as you are.
Okay.
I actually have them outside the top half of the league. I think this is going to be definitely a step back. We talked to Coach McCollum, and he's taken a lot of the Josh Schertz blueprint, building this team with a lot of guys from Northwest Missouri State. Bennett Schertz is a guy I cannot wait to see how he translates in the league. From all I understand, he is the most talented player of that group, and I think that he's the most D1 ready. So I think he's going to probably be what makes this thing go. But for me, rebuilding a team with a lot of D2 type of players, we've seen it once. It didn't really work very well at Indiana State early. Obviously, Coach Schertz got it going after a while, but I think this team is going to struggle, especially out of the gate. It is the team that I am probably the most bullish on from a new head coaching hire. I think Ben McCollum is going to fix this quickly, but I don't think it's going to be year one. I think there's going to be a lot of growing pains, but he's going to be able to build his culture and what he wants with this team. You mentioned a lot of players. Minyawu is a guy that I know a lot of people are really excited about from Wyoming. I think that he's going to get more of a role here, and he's going to be able to put his handprints on a game a little bit more. And like you said, his numbers are really good when he does play. So I don't think it's a bad team, but I have them outside the top half of the league.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. And I got to correct you a little bit, Jonathan. There's really 2 fan bases that don't like Drake, and that's Northern Iowa and I would say Bradley, due to the top 3 perspective the last couple of years. Because at the end of the day, just the resurgence in Des Moines and what Drake has done for the Missouri Valley Conference in the last handful of years. If you're a Valley fan, love them. And I'm saying this tongue-in-cheek, Jonathan, as I realize I'm just meeting you for the first time. And so all that to say is it's more of, do you believe in the model, the Josh Schertz model of, hey, I'm going to bring my guys, and can you be successful early on? I think that in this day and age, reloading in the transfer portal with D1 horses is probably going to be a better short-term fix than what I think Coach McCollum's going to do in the next 2-3 years. And I'm going to steal Baker's line that he said at the top of the podcast. Like, this is the definition of a team that's going to take 2 steps backward or 1 step backwards to go 2 steps forward in the coming seasons. Yeah,
I think from a pure X's and O's standpoint, the Indiana State blueprint really does show with this team. If you watch Northwest Missouri State at all, like, you know that like this team's going to use Daniel Abreu and those like dribble handoffs that Indiana State would use Avila with. And then like the other 2 players I didn't mention, I've heard like really good things about Eli Shetlar and like that he might end up starting for this team. And then he's an Indiana State transfer himself. Yep. And then Isaiah Howard is also like such an interesting player. I don't know if he'll be ready this year right away. He played at a really small high school in Missouri, like class 2. But I know, like, I don't want to like toot my own horn, but like I know athleticism when I see it, and like that kid can play.
Yeah, he's a good shooter too. He's definitely a guy to watch out for. I think that like if you listen to him, we actually had him on the show, and I've heard him in other interviews as well. When he talks about kind of that Schertz blueprint, like he talked to Josh Schertz about it over the offseason. Like they've actually traded notes on this, and you can kind of tell. I think he's setting the expectations low. I think they do finish kind of middle of the pack. And look, and when I say they're outside the top half, and as we get further with some of these teams, there's a lot of teams in the middle of the pack. Like the margin for error is going to be really close. But I think there is a scenario where this team does finish top 4. To your point.
Yeah, there's so many teams once you get past the top 2 that have a really wide range of outcomes, and like
3 through about 9 is just.
Yeah, I just kind of like leaned into like the fact that like I think Menyahu is going to be really good for them. Sturts is going to translate. This team's going to be able to knock down 3-point shots, and then like just betting on McCollum as a coach because he's done it so many times at Northwest. Let's go to number 4. This is a little bit of a dicey situation here because of something that happened yesterday, but I have Murray State 4th in the conference. I think you can make the argument that this is the most talented team in the league. They just have so many guys that can play across the board. Again, I said in the article that I've never been the biggest Steve Prohm like defender in the world, but like this team does have a pretty undeniable talent. And like I do think that we should probably start with the Laurent Rice stuff because he is no longer with the team as of yesterday.
Yeah, absolutely. You don't want to hear that 1 week before the season starts. You're kicking someone off the team. Obviously, or maybe not obviously, but I think we've seen the police reports or at least seen what the charges were. So I'm in no way go in the speculation game here. So I'll let those speak for themselves and stand for themselves. But at the end of the day, you don't want this to happen, 1, ever, and 2, definitely not a week before. Do I think Rice would have contributed in a big way for this Racer team? Probably not, but it's just more of a chemistry, and you just don't want a distraction this early on. Do I think Murray is still really good, and they've got a bunch of minutes coming back from last year, and you have a track record from Coach Prohm in Murray? Yeah, I'm pretty bullish on the Racers this year.
Yeah, this is to get to Laurent Rice's point. He's a guy who he didn't play a ton last year, but toward the end of the season, he kind of started showing things.
Yeah.
So that was kind of the disappointing part for me, seeing what happened, to not be able to see what his progress was. But I mean, obviously, we're not going to get into what happened. But just to kind of talk about Murray State as a whole, this is a really talented team. You're right. They've got a lot of really good players on this team. Two really good players coming back. Nick Ellington, Jacoby Wood. When you've got a good front court and a good back court player to start with returning guys, that's huge. And it felt like with the guys in the transfer portal, as you saw them coming in, it was hit after hit after hit. Guy like Kylan Milton, I think, is going to be awesome. AJ Ferguson, he's coming over from Southern Illinois. He was a guy who, if you watch Southern Illinois as the season goes on, we talked about this all the time. This is going to be kind of the hidden gem of this recruiting class for Murray State, because he was becoming their second best player behind Xavier Johnson last year. This is a really good team, a really talented team. The best team Murray State's had since they've come to the Missouri Valley Conference. And I think it's just going to be how well they gel together. I definitely think this is a team who should be having their sights on at least a top 4.
Yeah, wouldn't be at all surprised if this team didn't have to play Thursday in St. Louis. They have a tremendous amount of talent. I do really like the Ferguson addition. I'm just like a fan of when a guy transfers in conference, like the other coach coached against him the year before. So like he knows what he's going to get out of that guy. And he clearly saw something that he really liked playing against that guy. But yeah, like this backcourt is just ridiculous from a scoring standpoint. Wood, Harcum, Milton, even Ferguson are going to score a bunch. Ellington is undersized, but like he doesn't play like he's 6'7" at all. One of the more rock solid bigs in the league. And then I'm really interested to see what they get out of Kyron Lindsay. He was a guy that bounced around at the Power 5 level for a couple times. I think he's probably definitively like the backup center to Ellington right now on this team. It would be tough to play those two together, but I'm really interested to see what he brings to this team.
Yeah, I think with a guy like Lindsay, it's third team in three years. That's definitely a red flag for me. But obviously, Coach Prohm did see something in him. Back to your point about Ellington. 6'7", he's a little bit undersized compared to some of the other bigs. But in the Valley, I don't think that matters as much.
No,
it's going to matter more than non-conference, that he's not going to be as effective probably when he plays some of those bigger teams that they have to play. But when it gets to conference play, he's one of the most effective bigs in the league. probably on the short list for maybe top 3 or 4 bigs in the entire conference.
Absolutely. And second team all conference. But I mean, I love that one, you both talked about AJ Ferguson. I'm the resident Saluki fan here. So he came from SIU. Jonathan, I think you're absolutely crazy for liking in-conference transfers because, you know, the day we see ISU to Bradley, you know, that's just a day I don't want to, I'm done with college basketball. And so all that to say is he's going to fly under the radar at Murray. But if anyone paid attention to SIU last year, towards the end of the season, when Xavier Johnson, who at one point led the nation in scoring, was, you know, getting double and triple teamed, AJ Ferguson was starting to become the guy for Southern late because he had to be. So I just like that call out. And one of the assistant coaches, since, you know, Jonathan loves the interconference transfers, the assistant coach for Southern Illinois went to Murray State whenever Southern Illinois made a change at head coach. So there's kind of the connection there.
See, I don't have a dog in this fight. I'm a Missouri Valley fan. I don't have a team in this league. So, like, I'm purely saying from an evaluative standpoint, like, there's clearly something that Steve Prom liked playing against AJ Ferguson.
Yes. So. Yes, exactly. Hey, and we're Valley fans. So actually, you know, maybe for your audience, you know, it goes our teams, which are ISU and Southern Illinois, then it goes to the Valley. So I'd say we're pretty up to speed on all the Valley insider jokes. And yeah, it's the interconference one is we rag on a lot, and both of our teams have benefited and not benefited from interconference transfers.
I was just going to say, when we get to Illinois State and we talk about how much I like Landon Wolf, we can add that to part of the
why don't we jump right into them, because that's my next team. I don't know what to make of this Illinois State team. Like, Kinzinger was hurt. He was in a boot. Now he's not in a boot. He played in the exhibition. I'm assuming he's okay now. They got some other guys that aren't hurt. But, like, I have seen predictions for this team all over the place. Like, with what they return and what they bring in, would not surprise me at all if they got a bye in this league. But I also have seen, like, mid-major madness pick them to finish 12th. So, like I don't really know what to make of this team at all. I don't think there's a remote chance that they finish 12th unless something goes terribly, terribly wrong. They return Kinziger, obviously, Poindexter, Banks, all back. I'll let Baker go into Landon Wolf because I love him a lot too. They got some returners in the front court with Brandon Lieb, Chase Walker. Really like the Bowden Skunberg addition from North Dakota State. I thought he was a really solid player there. But yeah, since this is the Illinois State eval, we'll start with Baker here and let him just kind of go into what he thinks of his squad.
Yeah, this team's gonna be really good. This is it's actually, so Vance and I were actually just texting about this over the weekend. If you look at their backcourt and the depth they have from the backcourt perspective, this is one of the deepest backcourts in the Valley. Now, the big problem and the question mark that everybody's circling with this team is the front court. Not having Kendall Lewis and Miles Foster from last year, who were two of the best rebounders in the conference. I think Illinois State was one of the best rebounding teams in the league last year. That's I think the biggest question mark. Now, however, Chase Walker, I think, is going to be the guy that fills that role, the sophomore from Columbus, Ohio. I have seen Chase this summer, and he is in just dramatically different shape. It's a complete body transformation in great condition. If you watched the Illinois State last year, you saw that he did a lot of really good things. Had really good footwork. It didn't play a ton of minutes because I don't know if the shape was there yet, but I expect big things out of him. They did really well in the transfer portal, like we said. Landon Wolf, Bowden Skungberg goes all conference in the Summit League last year, so they've got a lot of guys to bring in. And then if you just some of the youth on this team, like Kinzinger is probably your best player as a sophomore. Chase Walker is one of their best players, sophomore. Daughtery and Norris, two really good freshmen that they brought in that are both going to have to play this year as well. So it's a very deep team, probably not the deepest in the league if you look at like a Murray and a Bradley. But as far as guard-wise, this is going to be a really good team. And another name to watch out for is Jordan Davis. He was kind of off and on when it comes to health last year. I think that you're going to see a different player this year from what I've heard. I think he's going to be more impactful to this team and kind of what they had expected when he originally transferred from Wisconsin.
Yeah, and I mean, at the end of the day, this is the third season for head coach Ryan Peden, so this is kind of a make or break season. I'd say expectations are high in normal Illinois, and this is probably the highest I've ever seen them in since I've lived in the Central Illinois region, and since we've been doing this podcast, which go like and download March to Arch podcast, we're our 7th season. So all that to say for Baker, I really hope that expectations are aligned with reality. But I think the thing for me with Illinois State is I don't think we're going to know a lot about Illinois State until game 5, 6, 7, 8, because the non-conference isn't great. And so for me is on all we can judge is on paper. And I don't think we're going to get a good barometer early on in the season either. So I could see them flying under the radar even more so.
November 24th, they in the Virgin Islands Paradise Jam, they play McNeese. I think that's the game that you're going to really find out about Illinois State.
That's a good measuring stick right there. Yeah, I do the bold prediction for every team in my article, and for Illinois State, I said I don't know if he will start right away, but by the end of the season, Landon Wolf will be like the 3rd best player on this team behind Kinziger and Skungberg. Like, I think he's that good. His role was severely diminished last year at Northern Iowa, and part of that was like Northern Iowa's starters were healthier, but he is just a complete sniper, and he's going to hit a ton of threes this year.
And he's exactly what they needed, because if you look at what Illinois State was last year, they were one of the worst 3-point shooting teams in the country. Yeah. And with the guys that they brought in, along with the guys coming back, shooting is not going to be the problem. I think that their biggest advantage last year and their disadvantage is going to flip. I think rebounding is the biggest question mark for this team. That front court play, as an Illinois State fan, that's the thing I'm most concerned about. It's enough to see Chase Walker, in a practice, or hear how good he's doing, and Brandon Lieb, how much better he is than he was last year. But it's one thing that you want to see, and you want to see it early for them. So I think it's a really good team, and I think they're going to compete for that top 4 for sure.
Next for me, number 6 is Belmont. Casey Alexander and his team's 3rd year in the Missouri Valley. They have done pretty well for the first 2 years. Obviously, have been knocked out in that 4-5 game both years by Indiana State and Northern Iowa, but have been right around that 4-5 bye kind of stretch right there. I have depth questions with this team, but I do think their starters have a chance to be very good. I am really intrigued by Jonathan Pierre. He was one of the best D2 players in the country 2 years ago. Really couldn't find his way off the bench much at Memphis, but I think this is a level that probably much more suits him. He has a complete offensive game, can shoot the 3, 6'9", pretty athletic. And then, other than that, you have 2 guards in Carter Witt and Brody Peoples who played in leagues and on teams that were similar to Valley level teams. And you have some breakout guys. Brigham Rogers should be your starting center. I was really impressed with him in moments as a freshman last year. And then Isaiah Walker as well. My question with this team is just who is scoring off the bench at all, and who is making an impact off the bench for you?
Yeah, I'd say you're a little bit more bullish on the Bruins than I'd say most, just because of who they lost last year. I mean, Dia, Gillespie, Cade Tyson, all players who are really leveling up in this year. And I think we've kind of said this on air and off air. I think Casey Alexander saw his squad last year, and ultimately that team, if Indiana State and Drake aren't as good as, or they don't have as many COVID years, or 5-year eligibility, that Belmont team would have maybe went undefeated in the OVC, if they weren't in the Missouri Valley. Yeah. And so that team was good. So all that to say is there's too many unknowns with Belmont in my mind for this team. But I'd say they're a little high for my liking, just because it's a lot of, you've got the high major guys that transferred down, and you've got some of the okay mid-major guys transferring up. I don't know if I see the strategy with how this team comes together. And that's my, I would say, 10,000-foot view of Belmont this year.
I think that's totally fair.
Yeah, this is another one step back, 2 steps forward team. For me, if you look at the freshmen they brought in, really good. Dylan Jenkins-Haynes, really good class of freshmen. He's building something here. Peoples and Witt are going to kind of make things go this year for them as grad players. And like you said, I think that they will transition to the Valley. I just don't know if they're going to be very good. this year. I think it's going to be a bottom half of the league team. Brigham Rogers, a guy I think that you mentioned, he's got to get away from some of those freshman mistakes he made a lot last year. If you watched his game, there was a lot of dumb fouls and there was a lot of, just freshman mistakes, really what it was. I think you're spot on. There is a really good player there. And to see him progress this year as being a really good big in this league is going to be one of the more fascinating guys to watch. Another guy that didn't play last year, redshirt, Drew Charnowski. I'm really curious because I know a lot of people were excited about him coming in from Burlington, Illinois, and I think he's going to be really good. And I think people are he's kind of an unknown, but he was really good in high school. So a lot of people are really excited to see what he does.
Yeah, I was about to say, like, this team has like a couple like younger players that are like from around like your guys, like more your guys area than in Illinois. I'm Chicago, so like I don't know a lot of these kids that play in like Central and Southern Illinois. I obviously hear about them, but I don't see them as much. I do think that, like, first of all, I just looked it up. Brigham Rogers 5.1 fouls per 40 last year. That's absolutely atrocious and like cannot happen with this group. But yeah, like I could totally see where this team goes sideways if like the guys off the bench don't kind of step up. The shooting, I think, is also another question with this group. I think Pierre's going to have to hit a lot of outside shots for them. I think
if you're a Belmont fan and you finish outside the bottom four, I think that's okay this year. Because like we said about Murray State, this is their best team they brought in the Valley. This is Belmont's worst team that they've had in the Valley. So we'll see how it goes.
So this is just such a tough, like, overall, like, range to predict it in this conference. 3 through 9. Like I can justify any one of these teams, like in like this range being really good or really bad. And like the next team that I have is dead last in Ken Palm's rankings. They were picked 10th in the conference, and that's Valpo. And like I just this team has experience. Like I really don't like. I could totally see this team making a massive jump, but I could also see the scenario where like they just like don't have enough. Like Stafford is obviously injured. There's huge questions around him. I think some of these freshmen, not just Schwieger, but guys like Williamson, Weatherspoon, they're going to need to step up. And I also think that like Isaiah Shaw was a really sneaky good transfer addition.
Yeah, Valparaiso is one of those teams. I think you have to start with Isaiah Stafford. Number one, is he going to be healthy? If he's going to be healthy and this team is 100%, this is a top 4 team in the Missouri Valley Conference. That they jump up that much if he's healthy. Darius Diavero, really good player from Canada. He really, as the year went on, got better and better. He's going to have an increased role this year. Cooper Schweiger is arguably one of the best bigs in the league. I think, Vance, you've said you think he's one of the best bigs in the league. He's very good. He was freshman of the year last year in the Valley. Seeing him take that next step is going to be important. Luth Koulibaly is a guy from Holy Cross that I think adds depth inside for this team that they're going to really need with Cooper. This is a team I really like. I really like what Roger Powell's doing. If you look at when he took this job and where Valpo was, they were like rock bottom as they could be. Mm-hmm. And he had a short window to kind of build something last year. He hit on he got lucky on a few players. And now this year he kind of gets to put more of a team together. This could be a really good team. I think even without Isaiah Stafford, and Vance, you can add on to this if you'd like, I think this team still finishes middle of the pack at least, even without Isaiah Stafford.
I'm with you on that one. That's a great take. I think this is the year that Valpo kind of gets out of the cellar mentality of Missouri Valley Conference fans, and that they finish middle, maybe mid-low to the pack. But I think their ceiling is the highest of this kind of mid-tier group if Stafford is not injured and can play the entire season.
Yeah, I'm glad that you guys are sort of with me on Stafford. Like, I by no means think he is a bad player, but I also think that at times last year he completely would shoot Valpo out of games. And like there were some times when he would shoot it and keep them in games. But I do think that like if they get natural progression from some of these freshmen, they can probably be just okay without him. Like if he is back and more efficient than last year, that's where they really take this like massive jump. But I would probably, and like it's kind of unfair because they were 300 last year, but I would bet on this team taking the largest Ken Palm jump in the conference.
I agree with that.
All right, number 8 is Evansville. For me, this is a team that's also replacing a lot of key players from last year. David Ragland's team did get better from year 1 to year 2, but they lose Ben Hummerkaus. You've seen Toomey. Those are both high major players now. Chuck Bailey, I thought, was a really good freshman last year that moved on to Nevada, and I think he's going to do some good things in the Mountain West. They lose a guy like Kenny Strawbridge, who was kind of like, he definitely had a decreased role last year, but that was because they had better players than him versus year 1 when he had to kind of be more of the guy. I think they took some really good and interesting transfers here. Tayshawn Comer is the one that sticks out to me from Eastern Kentucky. I think he could be an all-league guy if things click for him. Connor Turnbull as well. I don't know if Turnbull's going to start because I'm a huge Josh Hughes fan, but I do think that like that platoon there at the center spot could be one of the best in the league. And then I would go insane if I didn't mention that I think Gabriel Pizzato might be the best freshman in this conference this year.
Yeah, no, he's getting a lot of pub. I think this team is. I'm trying to think how I want to say this. I don't know if they're as good as they were last year on paper, but I think they're going to finish higher than the 10th place finish that they had last year.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a lot of really good players that you like a guy like Tanner Cuff. Every team in the world could want a guy like that. How he plays so hard. He's a guy that I really like that came back. You mentioned Josh Hughes. Josh Hughes was one of my favorite players to watch last year. If he takes that step in year 2, he could be in that short list of really good bigs in this league. So I think you hit it on the head. I think this is it's going to be interesting to see how these guys come together, but I like the youth on this team, and I like what Coach Ragland's doing. And if you think about where Evansville was prior to Coach Ragland coming in and where they are now, where they're competitive in a lot of games, he's done a really good job so far. So I think they'll finish higher, but I don't know if they're going to be as good a team.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I'm probably more bearish on Evansville just because of the turnover at the top with Evansville, especially with what is this, Ragland's 3rd season. Yeah. And don't get me wrong, there's of the Missouri Valley Conference podcast, we love Evansville and we love Coach Ragland. But I want to see some continuity at Evansville, and I haven't seen it yet. And I think this is one of those. I'm betting the other side of the coin of them underachieving. Maybe some of the talent they're bringing in.
If you listen to Valley circles, I will tell you just that Evansville, every single Valley fan out there has a sweet spot for Evansville. There's not you're going to be hard pressed to find a Valley fan that's not rooting for this team because they've always been kind of the little engine it could. You always want them to just kind of get over that hump. They're always the fun team to cheer for. So like you kind of mentioned about Drake, there's some people that have some ill will toward Drake. I would say this is probably the most loved team in the league.
Yeah.
They when I was in St. Louis last year, in my 3 years now, I've gone for 3 days the last 2 years. The first year I only went for 2 days. So I think now I've seen every team in the league play in that tournament. Evansville had by far the smallest group of fans there last year when I saw them in that quarterfinal. But I'm watching them and I'm like, they have some fun players. Toomey's got some skills. Hummerkaus obviously was great. They were a fun team to watch, even if the results weren't always there. And I also will say the last piece of real analysis that I have on this team is they have to figure out how to get Cam Hafner back to what he was at Eastern Illinois, because he was one of the best shooters in the country at Eastern Illinois. And he comes in last year, he shoots 97 threes, makes 30 of them, around 31%. That was a 12% drop off from what he was at Eastern Illinois. If they can get him back to shooting the ball, not even at a 43% clip, but just better and as a good shooter, completely makes a difference for this team. Let's go to number 9 for me. I got a comment. I posted this in the Trilly Donovan Discord, the article when I published it today, and I got a comment on it. The first comment I got was you're really bold for putting Southern Illinois at 9th. And I want to hear your guys' thoughts on this team because I could obviously if we sound redundant here, it's because we kind of are. Like there are so many teams that could get a bye in this league in the Missouri Valley tournament. But I know I'm a little lower on Southern Illinois. I just want to hear what your guys' thoughts are on this team before I go into anything.
Well, I mean, I'm the resident Saluki fan,
Yeah.
so I'm pretty high on them. But I would say just even from the Missouri Valley circles, this is one of those teams that the preseason picked 7th. So I don't think it's bold for you to go, down to 9, because at the end of the day, I think 3 through 10 or 11 is a crapshoot, or you can make a case that it's a crapshoot. All that to say is it's probably the team that's the most unknown. You have a new coach that everyone loves, the Scott Nagy hire, because they're a proven winner. But you've replaced 14 of 15 players. You have 1 returning player from this roster from last year. So I think that's what's scaring a lot of people away. Because also there's not the proven, calling you out, but I mean, we kind of said you were kind of high on Drake, but I mean, Drake is a proven name and brand.
Yeah.
Southern Illinois is not one of those as of recent years. And so, I don't think it's crazy for you to pick 9. Do I think that I would take the over on that one? I'd hammer the over on that of them finishing better than 9th. But I think there's a team that Coach Nagy did very well in the portal. He made a lot out of this roster. And so ultimately I think it's gonna, and I'm honestly, I'm getting texts and DMs because they just played an exhibition game that got over around 8:00. So I'm trying to get some intel as well. But, it's one of those of, I think the core 3 you're going to see is Kennard Davis. That is the returning player from last year. He was a freshman last year that showed, I'd say, spurts of greatness, or what the expectations will be for him in year 2. And then the other 2 rounding that out are going to be Ali Deba is the name right now. He was 3rd team preseason all conference. Then the other one to keep on your radar is Elijah Elliott, transferred from Texas Rio Grande, 16-ish points per game there. This team's long. This is going to be one of the tallest, biggest Southern Illinois teams I can think of in recent memory. They're going to play defense, which is not Scott Nagy's calling card, but he's been saying this may be one of the better defensive teams I've had. It's more of who's going to be able to make shots. I don't think this is a team that's going to shoot the 3 very well. I don't think they want to shoot 3s.
Yeah.
Once again, I have not seen the box yet on the game tonight, but I think they attempted 13 or 14 threes. That's it. And so something that we're not accustomed to as Saluki fans.
I think you're low at 9. But I also wouldn't fault you. I think that you can make a case that this team might be not as good. Very transfer heavy when you look at this roster. But I think it's a really good roster. I think Ali Deba is probably the best transfer in the league. That might be a hot take. I'm not sure. But to me, he's the best transfer coming in on paper, in my opinion. But just to kind of piggyback on everything Vance said, Scott Nagy's a good coach too. He's a winner. He wins a lot of games. If you look at his records he's had Wright State, things were going a little bit downward at times for him, but he still wins a lot of games. And I think that's going to be the calling card. They're going to win a lot of games. I don't know if I would put them in that contender role for the league, but to finish in the top 4, I think is a very realistic possibility for this team.
Yeah. So you guys probably hit on everything that I kind of was going to go into. This team is going to be very athletic. They're very long. They have a clear identity at center where they got guys that are going to be really physical. I'm really interested to see how much weight, what Jaheim Weber looks like this with the offseason, with the summer with this team, because I did think that he needed to put on some weight, but it's no denying that the kid has talent. He was one of the best players in Illinois last year as a high schooler at Normal. The reason I'm lower on this team is I just don't know if they're gonna make enough outside shots. That's literally it.
That is their biggest question mark for sure.
I think they're gonna have to play Drew Steffi a lot because he's one of the only guys on this team that I think can consistently shoot the 3. Deba can a little bit too, but not doesn't have crazy good percentages. But yeah, I do think that this team's length and athleticism is going to give people teams matchup problems. And I also think that if you're finishing 9th, you probably can still win 7 conference games in this league, maybe even 8. That's just kind of the nature of the league. A lot of these teams are going to beat each other. and it wouldn't be at all surprised if Southern Illinois outperformed my expectations here. I will say on an individual player basis, I love the Damian Mayo transfer. I thought he plays so hard, and like for what this team's trying to do, I thought it was a perfect fit.
Yeah, and he started 21 out of 29 games last year here at Missouri State, which is Missouri Valley. So I think to your point about the 3-point shooting, that's my biggest concern with this team. Where's the shooting going to come from, and if it's going to matter? I think if you look at not to try to talk about my own team, but if you look at Illinois State last year, them not being able to shoot the ball mattered a lot. Now, I think that there's more scoring on this team, maybe just more talent-wise on this Southern Illinois team than last year's Illinois State team. But I think that's the scenario where you are looking at Southern Illinois as a 9th, 10th place team, is if the shooting really comes and matters at the end of these games. So I think what you said is fair. I'd have a little bit higher than you, like I said, but I don't think that I really, like Vance said, you can't really fault anyone wherever you put a team from probably 3 through 9.
Just to be clear, by the way, like Nagy was my second favorite hire in the league this offseason. Like I do like him a fair bit. It's more of he is going to win a ton of games here. I just am not like 100% certain it's going to be with this group of players. So 10 for me then is UIC. I have some major quarrels with this bottom 3 that I have. UIC, the entire UIC section was basically just like me, like kind of yapping about how like I don't know what this team's identity is going to be. Like it didn't really see like there was a rhyme or reason with like the transfers they took, and I know they had to replace a lot of players. Phillip and Ethan Pickett are the real only 2 returners on this team, and like I think both of them will be solid contributors. They were both solid contributors again last year, but like it was just they have a really good freshman class. I'll say that it might be the best freshman class in the league. But like there was just like really no like rhyme or reason with some of these transfers, and I just cannot figure out what this team is going to be.
Yeah, I think they're very much an unknown in this league. You mentioned about Ethan Pickett. I think playing with a guy like CJ Jones, Toby Oconee, and Isaiah Rivera last year, he kind of got lost in the shuffle as like the 4th guy. But when you saw him, he was effective out there, and I think that if he has to take a bigger role, I think he's going to be better. Phillip Scoble is a guy who. A stretch big who he can knock down an outside shot. I think he was 3rd team all preseason from the Writers. So he's definitely a more respected player in the league, been here for a few years now. But to your point, you're right. I mean, if you look at some of these guys that they brought in, it kind of feels like a bunch of lotto tickets I'm not really sure what they're going to be or who's going to stand out. I mean, maybe you can look at a guy like Kobe Jeffries come from UT Martin. He's 4.5 points a game. Spot starter there. Maybe Coach Eson saw something in him that he can take him to another level. You can go down the list of all their transfers, and to your point, like you said, I'm not really sure what they were doing. It felt like they bought a bunch of lotto tickets, and we're going to find out really quickly who's going to progress and who's not going to progress, and who's going to be a part of this and who's not. So I think this team is at least a year or 2 away though before they're anywhere in contending for the Valley.
Yeah, this team will have no identity, kind of to your point, Jonathan, especially with Coach Eson, who we've had on the show and talked with, but kind of maybe not self-prescribed, but at least on Stanford's bio, he was the offensive coordinator at Stanford. But like you look at this roster, I have no idea who's going to score on this team. Like for a offensive-minded coach. So all that to say is so many unknowns, and honestly, Vicar, I hadn't heard you say the lotto ticket. I love that analogy for this UIC team. And going back to that 10,000-foot view of UIC, I think this may just be a resource, and until they can figure out their NIL in any type of big way, I think this is going to be what happens at UIC.
Yeah, so there was a part of this section where, first of all, I do actually like Ahmad Henderson. I don't know if he's ready to play at this level yet, but I think he will be in a year. He's a Chicago kid. Like, I think there's a lot of kids in Chicago that can play in the Missouri Valley that I don't think UIC does a tremendous job of getting. And you can say sort of the same thing about DePaul to a lesser extent. But I do think that like having a backcourt in Ahmad Henderson and Carlos Harris that's a backcourt that I really like. They won't be the best in the league. They may not even be like a top half point guard group in the league. But I think those are 2 guys that like the Chicago kids, they'll make an impact on your program, whether it's this year or down the line.
Yeah, and you need guys like that to hit because it's going to make you more attractive to those Chicago kids going forward. So you get more and more talented players. Anderson's a guy that's really interesting from last year at Niagara. He's a really streaky shooter, and I think that he's going to have to be a more consistent shooter for him to be effective in this league, especially from a guard perspective. If he's going to be one of their top usage guards this year, which I expect he will be. But you're right. I definitely think that they need to do something to cement that footprint in Chicago because it is such a basketball resource to have a Division I school in Chicago. They should be able to just have their pick of players. There's so many good players, and I know we've got 5 Division I teams in Chicago, but like there's plenty of players to go around.
Rob Ason should be able to walk into any public league red game and pretty much find a kid that can play at UIC. And then the last thing I'll say on this group is if it does go sideways and the season is really starting to fall apart down the stretch, just play your younger players. They have some really good younger players here that some are projects, but it gives you a building block for next year. And you want to be able to keep these guys around too with the transfer portal era. So number 11 for me is Indiana State. Full disclosure, I could totally be wrong about this team. I do think that some of these guys can hit and I just misevaluated them. But the bottom line is their transfer class, they took a bunch of guys from teams that didn't win a lot at all. And Tyron Cook, VMI was one of the worst teams in the country last year. That's where they took Tyron Cook from. Samaj Teal, I kind of think he was the outlier at Presbyterian. His numbers were really, really good. And I think he can be an all-conference player in this league. I think he was far from the problem. And I think you can make sort of the same argument about Marcus Harding. It's just is concerning when you take three transfers that were all on teams that did not win a lot of games and are trying to rebuild a culture as a first year coach. And then the other thing is Indiana State was one of the worst teams in the country, or not worst. The worst isn't the right word. They used their bench the least amount of anyone in this league last year, and almost anyone in the country. And I don't think that's going to help when you're going to have Aaron Gray, Derek Vorst, Jaden Daughtry playing meaningful minutes for this team because they didn't get any experience last year. Now, I'm not faulting Josh Schertz for that by any means, but it's just the reality of the situation. Those guys have not gotten meaningful reps in this league yet.
Go ahead, Vance. I'll let you start.
Oh yeah, sorry about that. I'm with you on that one, and I know I'm going to steal what Baker's going to say, but I don't disagree with your transfer comments, but also this is a team that went to the NIT and was the latest with a coaching change, and so I think they were already behind the 8 ball from the get-go. So I honestly think they were kind of hampered out of the gate, which is why they kept with Graves and some continuity there. But nothing sticks out of this Indiana State team that makes me think they're going to finish outside the bottom 4. Maybe I just leave it there until some of these players turn out to be better Missouri Valley Conference players than what their stats at other schools tell me.
Yeah, this is a bottom 4 team. Aaron Gray is a guy I'm really curious about. That he was a guy that I was excited about last year. And then with his eligibility and how all that worked out, didn't really play a lot with Schertz, but he was 12.5 points a game at Niagara the prior year. Now he's going to get a chance to play with this team. Samaj Teal is a guy that I know you mentioned. He's someone I think that Valley circles are kind of saying this. Is he going to be the guy for this team? Tyron Cook is a guy I know you mentioned about VMI, but he started 23 out of 32 games last year as a freshman, so he should be able to play right away. And he has good experience. So, I don't think they're going to be any good. But to Vance's point, I mean, that's what happens when your coach leaves you the day after the NIT championship all the way in April. So, which luckily for them, they had a guy like Graves kind of in their back pocket right there, ready to take the role. And I think he's a good hire, especially considering the situation they were in. So this is not necessarily to take one step back to take 2 steps forward. I think there might be a few steps to take backwards before Indiana State can kind of get things rolling again. But, Graves didn't have a ton of success at South Alabama. So I think this is kind of a second run at a head coaching job. And hopefully the the distance from that job, and then learning under Coach Schertz is going to take this team where in a couple of years he gets the Holman Center rocking again.
Yeah. The other thing was like what sucked about this situation was like you knew this was like coming in January, and like you knew Josh Schertz was going to get job offers from other schools in January when everyone figured out like how good they were, and like it sucked because they got so far in the NIT. It like almost would have been better off if they got upset early and they could have started that process and maybe formed a more competent team. Not to say that Graves wouldn't have been the option if they lost earlier in the NIT. I think it's more likely than not that he would have. I just think he probably would have had more players available to him. They were playing into late March, like a month after the portal opened.
Yeah, I think you're right when it comes to a transfer portal perspective. I don't know if he would have been able to save any of the guys. I think that's core 5 guys who all transferred out. They were all gone.
They were too good for.
As soon as, especially because I think, what was it, Vance? You check me on this if not. It was like right around their first game of the NIT where the St. Louis rumor was fully out there. Like we knew. I think even we were at the NIT championship game, and I remember you sent out a tweet of him walking off the floor. And he's like, "There goes Coach Schertz the last time in Indiana State," and sure enough, the next day it was over. So I will say that. If you're an Indiana State fan, unfortunately, the last year was such a good high. But for 2 people who were at the NIT, I'll speak for Vance. That was one of the best atmospheres as a college basketball fan I've ever had to be in Hinkle Fieldhouse to watch that NIT championship game. So just watch some replays of that last year games, Indiana State fans, because I think this year might be a struggle.
Yeah, that team rocked. Coach Schertz rocked. He was super nice at the Missouri Valley tournament the last couple of years to me and answering the questions I had for him. But this is a complete rebuild from the ground up in my eyes. And then I will also say, like, not to like take a shot at anyone, but like the storyline around both Ason and Graves has been like the second chance thing. Like they both didn't really succeed at a prior school, and now we're getting like a second life in this conference, so to speak. Ason's teams at UAB weren't necessarily like bad teams. Like they finished 500 or above every year in the conference, and he got 4 years and was fired because they were just kind of stuck in that middle ground. There were people that didn't think he deserved to get fired when he did. Graves wasn't exactly that. His teams at South Alabama, they weren't like the worst they could possibly be, but they did struggle. So, but yeah, he now got to like coach under Josh Schertz. Maybe that helps him. There is reason for optimism here for sure. And then lastly, to number 12, Missouri State. So I am a Mizzou student. I watched 2 years of Konzo Martin here. I guess I watched him the year before when I knew I was going here too. But I watched 2 years of him in person here. The positive things about him, he gets his guys to play hard. He genuinely gets his guys to play hard. He's not an offensive coach. He's not a guy that's a super great recruiter. And this roster, I don't know no other way to say this, is one of the grossest rosters I've ever seen on a Missouri Valley team. Like this team has nobody that can score. Like I don't think they have a single guy that can create his own shot on this team. They have some players that like transferred up from like lower schools in D1, and then like 3 JUCO guys, and then obviously some like younger players too that are freshmen. I have no idea how this team is gonna finish like top 10 in offense in this league.
I'm going to let Baker get into this, but just because we're recording the night of exhibitions, they lost to Southwest Baptist. They lost 65-72 to Southwest Baptist. So like,
it was like 6-22 last year.
Yeah, they're not good. So just putting that in perspective, Baker, take it away.
Yeah, so we do over-unders for these Valley teams. When we talk about their conference wins, we put the over-under for Missouri State 3.5. which I think they're going to get 4. To be fair, but yeah, you're right. I don't think that this is this isn't a very good team. You talked about Konzo Martin, how you saw him at Mizzou. The one thing I will say is I've seen Konzo Martin at Missouri State in his first tenure there, where he took a team to win a regular season championship, and kind of based on a few tough losses in non-conference, probably was a quality enough to be a tournament team that year, with Kyle Weems back in the day. But this team is not that. I really like their freshmen. I really like the 4 freshmen that they brought in, all guys who can score the basketball, and I hope that they get a lot of playing time. You're right when it comes to a transfer perspective. It's not a great group, but I also feel like he's the guys that Des White's the guy that I think I'm most excited to see. 7.9 points per game at Austin Peay. Started almost every game. He's an all freshman team player as well in the Atlantic Sun. So he's a guy that I think, to me, with him and a lot of the freshmen they have, Konzo is building his team for Conference USA. And I feel like this is he is setting kind of that groundwork that he needs to be able to build the team, and then next year's recruiting class be able to recruit for Conference USA with the guys he already has, the young guys that he already has. I think that's where we're looking at. I'm sure obviously they're not going to just lay down every game. They're going to be competitive in some games here and there, but really for me, I feel like this is kind of like a lame duck year for Missouri State.
They would actually be projected 8th via Ken Baum in Conference USA this year. So like the conferences in recent years, the Missouri Valley has been better. There will be probably years in the future where Conference USA is better. So like they're jumping to this is the reason they are going to that conference is football related.
100%.
Nothing else.
It's a good move for football. I mean, you're going to FBS. It's a real for the university. This is a good move. So it's like I know that like if you listen to our show, we joke about Missouri State, and I know the Irish fans don't like us very much anymore. But taking a step back from the non-Valley perspective, like it makes sense what they're doing. Like they're not concerned about basketball. The money is FBS football.
Yeah, and like I do actually think that some of these freshmen can play. And they're also like Jarrell Baldwin was a really under-recruited guy out of Hyde Park in Chicago.
For sure.
I think that they're also kind of in the tier of like if things aren't going the way you want to, like just play your younger guys.
Yeah,
like,
roll the ball out there, freshmen go play.
Yep.
And that's why I think a guy like Des White as a sophomore is going to get a lot of valuable minutes, kind of running the show for this team from one of those really lead guards. And I think you're going to learn more. He's going to be able to kind of get himself better where, next year when they are in Conference USA as a junior, should he come back, I think that he's going to be one of their better players going into that league. So, and someone that Conference USA is going to have to look out for. So to me, obviously, Konzo Martin's not coming here to try to lose, but I also think he has one eye here on the Valley and another eye pointing to Conference USA next year where he wants to be competitive right away. I think it's more important to be competitive right away there than to be good in the last year in the Valley.
Yeah, I do think that Des White can be a really good player in the future for this program. He's probably a year away from really taking that leap to being like an all-conference kind of guy or like a legitimate number one option. But yeah, like as you said, Konzo Martin won games at Missouri State before. So like as bad as it was at times at Tennessee, Cal, Missouri, there is a level of coaching that guys are really good at and not very good at. And that could absolutely be the case for Konzo Martin. We just haven't seen it in a decade and a half.
Yeah.
So, all right, that is our 12. Do we have any sort of final thoughts on the league this year before we wrap this up?
Go ahead, Vance.
Yeah, so maybe I'll throw it out to you, and this is every once in a while we'll do quick fire with some guests, but this is my favorite question. I think it's the epitome of the league this year. So would you take Bradley and Northern Iowa or the field to win the Missouri Valley Conference?
I think so. Typically, I take the field in these kind of questions, but I'll take Bradley and Northern Iowa here just because, like, I think in the current landscape, these two teams don't just have like the best roster construction and like best talent in the league. They also have the best coaches. So like, I think you can depend on those two teams being very reliable. Whereas like other teams like have way more question marks.
Yeah. I think this could be a year where you see a team come out of nowhere that does win the league because like Bradley and Northern Iowa on paper, really good teams. Obviously, the 2 top teams in the league. But like if you compare them to past conference champions and past teams that have kind of been those preseason favorites in the league, I don't think they're quite as at that level. I think they're lesser teams than that. I think there's a lot of really competitive teams that we just don't know about yet in the Valley. So I would feel really confident if you were going to say Bradley and Northern Iowa are going to be a lock for the top 2, or I'm sorry, for the top 4. But it could be a crapshoot. And one injury could derail their whole season. So it's going to be an interesting year for the Valley. I think to kind of circle all the way back to what we originally talked about them being a top 10 league last year, I think if they finish in the top 12 or 13 this year, I think that's a successful season. I really don't think that that's taking too far of a step back. If you just kind of keep yourself a little bit above water, above that, midway point, like you don't want to be past 15 for me. And so if you're kind of in that 12, 13 range, I think you live with that.
Agreed.
Yeah, I don't think I have anything else. The one other thing I actually will say before we get out of here, for a very long time, the Arch Madness was like chaos, and the last couple years, it's kind of been like there's been some established programs that like have just sort of won in the tournament and taken care of business. I think we could be back to this year, a league where you see like of the 8 games on Thursday and Friday, 3 of like the lower seeds win, 3 or 4. Like, I think you could be back to that this
This is
year.
going to be 2020 all over again, I think.
Yes.
One of the
2020 where we had 4 versus 7 on Sunday.
one of the few conference tournaments that actually got played that year.
Yep.
Many of them either did not play or did not finish. So I think that will do it for today's episode of Brackets, Bubbles, and Bid Stealers. I will take us out here. If you came to hear about Tyler Self and where he's working, you came to the right place. If you came to hear about the Conzo Martin return to Missouri State, you came to the right place. And if you came to hear about Caleb Grill and the latest happenings with him, you came to the right place. This is Season 5, Episode 30 of Brackets, Bubbles, and Bid Stealers, our Missouri Valley preview. We'll see you next time.